Welcome to another day in the Matrix. This is Red Pill Podcast 247. I hope you're all doing amazing on this fine winter solstice, enjoying what they call the darkest days of the year. And even though there is darkness, remember that you are the light that shines through that darkness. So happy solstice to the wolf pack. It's been a wild year, but our moon is coming up soon. We got the wolf moon on January 3rd, right at the top of the year. So that means the first Red Pill podcast of 2026 will be perfectly timed for the wolf full moon. And I'm definitely looking forward to that podcast in a couple weeks where we'll set our intentions for the year ahead together as a community. But in the meantime, I have a very special Red Pill podcast for you all today, and I believe this one has some powerful discoveries for the year ahead. So you'll definitely want to make sure you're taking notes during this presentation. And just a quick update, since I had several requests following up on my Black Friday sale last month, I decided to open up that exclusive discount one more time for the holidays. So if you're interested in taking advantage of my biggest sale of the year and what will be my final sale on my website, likely all the way until Black Friday next year, about a year out from now, then you could head over to watersabove.com/MMHoliday, and using this promo code 30MMHS at checkout will give you the biggest discount available on all of my masterminds and all of my package deals. And since you're Patreon supporters, you get an even bigger discount than the one that's available to the public. So please make sure that you're going to the correct page, because the link that I'm sharing with you all here is exclusive for our mastermind community. So go ahead and check out the link in the description below this video or in the pinned comment, and it will take you directly to this specific private page. And if you want the best value, definitely make sure to check out the package deals, because those will give you up to 35% off for the bundle, making this truly my biggest sale of the year. And it'll be live until Christmas for the holidays. Again, I appreciate all of your support. Truly means the world to me. Now let's get into today's Red Pill. But before we get started, make sure to get relaxed, get comfortable. Grab yourself a cup of coffee or tea if it's a little earlier in the day, or a glass of wine or a beer or any beverage of your choice if it's getting a little later out there in the Matrix. And also make sure to comment below this post here on Patreon to vote on the altcoins that you'd like me to cover in next week's Red Pill podcast. But please, before you leave a comment, just make sure that you use the search function here on Patreon to check that I have not covered that project in at least 3 months. And in the event that it's been over 3 months since I've reviewed that altcoin, or if I've never covered that altcoin before, as long as it has at least 1 year of chart history, you can go ahead and comment below with the name of the altcoin and include the ticker symbol next to it as well. And whatever submissions get the most likes, those top 4 projects will be selected for next week's Red Pill. And since last week when I was covering SPX 6900 or whatever it's called, I didn't get the full chart, I will actually be recapping that one later today. So I have access now to that full chart, and I'll do it justice by doing another quick TA on that for you guys, plus an additional 4 altcoins. So you're not getting sold short this week. I will also be adding in that additional one to keep it fair and square. So in last week's Red Pill, we were laser focused on the specific dates of December 17th into 18th as the key pivot dates for the bearish energy that we were dealing with here in crypto land, specifically for Bitcoin, of course, because ultimately at the end of the day, that's what's moving this market. And we could, of course, see all the other altcoins are kind of doing their own thing sometimes, depending on where they're at in their cycles. But ultimately, we're trying to focus on what the key dates are specifically for Bitcoin. And obviously, that does influence quite a bit what else is happening here in the crypto market. So as we're filming this right now, I just want to let you all know We have the weekly closes officially in. So, what we're looking at right now is some fresh data for the new daily open. And we're going to be, of course, covering the TA specifically later in today's podcast, but we are getting quite a bit of volatility as we've moved into the new week. And right now, the traditional markets are actively closed. We only have crypto trading alone. So, if you see the market doing some wacky things during today's red pill, you know why. A big reason also is the fact that we are wrapping up that drama festival regarding the Bank of Japan and their interest rate hike that everybody expected. And, well, we talked about that last week as well. And I was not necessarily poking fun at it, it was moreover just kind of to share with people that once something becomes very popular, it's best for you to be maybe considering the opposite will happen, right? So that was the point of me talking about the Bank of Japan's interest rate hike and that really popular chart that was making its rounds for Bitcoin, showing how after every rate hike, which, by the way, there's only a couple of iterations of, that we would see a big correction on Bitcoin. And I was sort of poking at it and saying, well, because this is so popular and it's what everyone's expecting, then I actually think we're going to get priced into that particular event. And so far, that is what happened. But the focus of last week's red pill was not that. It was about the energetics tied to that date range of the 17th into 18th, specifically the 18th. And now, the main reason that I isolated that date was because last year in 2024, well, I should say one of the main reasons, let's say the exoteric main reason that I isolated this date was because last year, as you can see over here, that was a local top for Bitcoin. But not only was it a local top, it was coupled with extreme greed sentiment. And that's really important to point out. That's why whenever there's more bearish narratives circulating right now, whilst we're already in extreme fear, which I believe is still quite the case. As you can see, we're pretty much 2 months deep into pretty much perpetual extreme fear. That's making me less bearish because obviously this is the expectations. This is the way the current market participants are behaving. Of course, this isn't the only thing you'd pay attention to. This is very skewed and probably not the best pool of data either, but looking at price and looking at this do help in getting what's happening generally. Of course, I wouldn't bet the farm on these sorts of things, but they're compasses in a way. Now, getting back to what we're focusing on here regarding last year, December 17th to 18th, and how that was a local top coupled with extreme greed sentiment. And in essentially all of my updates over the past 2 months, I've been talking about how this year, 2025, feels like the polar opposite of last year, month to month, with March and April of last year being incredibly bullish. Let me quickly show you that. I'm going to turn everything off so there's no noise. So March, April of 2024 over here were local tops. And we were feeling incredibly bullish back then. Whilst this year we had March, April, where we had a market crash, the opposite. And what's funny is where we corrected into on April 7th into April 8th was pretty much back testing that top. So we had lots of greed over here and obviously lots of fear over here. And it's happening in the same months. So the seasonality is pretty fascinating, how it's just polar opposites. Then last year, all of Q4 up until around December 17th was incredibly bullish as well, with the bullish energy kicking in specifically from the date around October 10th into October 11th, which I find to be very important here. Whilst this year, that's when the crypto market started crashing. Like the complete polar opposite month by month. So, also in last week's Red Pill, I covered the reason why I believe they're ritualizing these specific dates of December 17th and December 18th. And the reason was not only because it's the start of Saturnalia, which you can see the date right there of December 17th, but it's also the final days of the sun moving through the constellation Ophiuchus before entering Sagittarius in sidereal astrology, which sidereal follows what's happening in the actual sky. And this was specifically a key date for this year because we're in the year of the snake. And the snake is the serpent, and Ophiuchus is the serpent bearer. So we have the direct snake symbolism dialing in our decode even more. And we now know for a fact that this snake year has been rough for cryptocurrency specifically. I mean, it hasn't been as bad for Bitcoin, but it's been pretty rough for the altcoins. And what's really fascinating about this is the fact that the last snake year in 2013 was absolutely epic for Bitcoin. Here we have the year of the snake in this orange section, and you can see that it was a crazy bull run all the way up until the, well, let me show you when. Turn on the moon phases. And it was right there into the December new moon, where we had the all-time high for Bitcoin during the year of the snake on the December new moon. And what just happened this year into the December new moon a couple days ago, well, that was pretty much marking our bottom right there. So this is where things start to get very interesting because we've crashed into the December new moon, and Bitcoin has been pretty much doing the opposite from last year. Are we seeing a theme as well for the last year of the snake where we are doing opposites? So the main thing to point out, let me turn off all this noise here. The main thing to point out about the 2013 snake year chart for Bitcoin is the major pump Bitcoin had into April of 2013. We've actually talked about this already, probably like 20 different times this year, but I'm just kind of doing a quick recap for those that are newer to our community. And by the way, if you are new to the community, welcome to the Wolfpack. So great to have you here with us. You're going to see that in 2013, Bitcoin had a major move up into April. We had a pump into April. But then during this snake year here in 2025, that was, of course, our tariff crash I just showed you a little bit ago, where Bitcoin traded into its yearly low during the month of April. Then from January 2013, right over here, you see how we were a little bit sideways into the new year? Well, from the beginning of 2013 all the way into April 2013, Bitcoin was on a tear. And this year we did the opposite. We were crashing pretty much the entire year since the start. We only had one anomaly, and that was during Trump's inauguration, which I feel is unfair to even count because that was mostly just leverage. That wasn't any smart money piling in for a couple of days. You know, that would be stupid. So when you see that move that we had up into the days leading into the inauguration, that was purely just market makers and leverage, but the market makers knew what they were doing because they're here to take your money, right? And they get the fees. So the more people trading, whether you're trading and you have an excellent performance or not, it doesn't fucking matter because the exchanges just want you trading. They just want you trading. It's like, think about it like going over a bridge that collects a toll. They don't care if you take 10 hours to get over that bridge and you're complaining about the traffic in front of you, and they also don't care if you go through it at 100 miles per hour as long as you pay the toll. So they want as many people paying quote unquote tolls as possible, and that's why there's been a huge push since the last market cycle to get everyone leverage trading, to just get everyone perpetually trading all the time, right? So anyways, that's a side note, but I think it's important to mention regarding that slight move up that we had, that fake out that we had into January 20th of this year, because it was purely just I don't have to explain it. You guys get what I'm saying. The point is that the true top was initially in the end of, or mid end of December 17th. It's when the true euphoria was around. And then we had a little bit of euphoria for Trump's inauguration, but Ever since then, it was a slide into April, and that was the same. That was the opposite of what happened in 2013. But what was similar, you see that correction right there? The date that it happened into was December 18th. That was similar this year. We did have a notable correction so far into that specific date. Isn't that wild? Bitcoin loves making these extreme moves during December 17th and December 18th, just like it hit the all-time high in the 2017 cycle on that exact date. So you zoom in, that was our all-time high for Bitcoin, December 17th. Also, looking back on 2013, the last year of the snake, you can see how from October 10th, which is right here, we started pushing up into the next leg up of price discovery. Again, this year we did the opposite. We had a crazy liquidation event on October 10th, and then we've been sliding since. We're doing the opposite, guys. It's pretty insane. And how similar actually 2013 was to last year, believe it or not. 2024 is pretty wild. And considering this circles back, and I don't want to confuse people, but what I'm saying here is that this year, 2013, is very similar to last year, where we had a major move up into April. We chopped, we were boring as shit. And then once we got to October 2024, we pivoted and we went up into the December new moon, right before Trump's inauguration, which then we started sliding, and many altcoins still are going lower into the end of the year, which is mimicking what we saw in 2014. I'm not saying that that's exactly what we're going to do, but that's what it's seeming like. The seasonality is 1-to-1. So anyways, just put a pin in that. I put a pin in that for now. Getting back to this, considering this circles back to what I was reviewing with you all in a recent Red Pill, where I mentioned that the last time we had a similar setup for our upcoming eclipse season, which will be in February and March in 2026, right around the corner, was back in January, or sorry, not January, but back in 2015. Now, there is a big difference about 2015 compared to the upcoming year of 2026, and that's the fact that 2015 was a Shemitah year. So that's part of the 7-year cycle, the sabbatical year. The last time we had a Shemitah was back in 2021. So that is one big difference that we have to point out. And then also what's crazy about 2020 was the fact that we had this kind of major crash reset that matches what happened in 2015. So imagine this is February 2020. This is March 2020. The recovery is the C19 crash recovery. And then we went sideways and then have a release. I feel like there's a lot of parallels. It's just the seasonality is a little bit flip-flopped, and I believe that's what makes the work that we're doing here so powerful, because it's not necessarily just pointing out months. It's about pointing out the relationship with the esoteric information. This was a Shemitah year. Also, we have the eclipses that we're considering, etc., etc. Getting back to this, we were talking maybe 2 Red Pills ago, or maybe it was the last one, I don't remember exactly, how the upcoming eclipse season in February, March 2026 has one example that is similar in the posture of the eclipses, and that's January through April of 2015, where that year started with a total solar eclipse in March of 2015, and then a couple weeks later we had the total lunar eclipse in early April. And if you measure backwards, I believe it was April 4th. If you measure backwards all the way till that low that we had in January, it's about 80 days. And I showed you this already in a recent Red Pill, so just go back and watch it. But if we were to do the same for the upcoming total lunar eclipse on March 3rd, 2026, it matches where we are right now here in December of 2025. So if we are actually repeating this pattern, then we'll need to continue to consider these nuances, such as in the 2013 year of the snake, Bitcoin was correcting heavy into the month of July, whilst this snake year in 2025, Bitcoin was pumping into the month of July. That's July. So again, our lows in April, highs in July. Lows or highs in April, lows in July. It's opposite. So this is powerful, guys. This snake year 2025, we were pumping into July along with a majority of the altcoins, notably XRP's last local high was in July. Whilst the prior year in 2012, over here, Bitcoin was doing the opposite in July, where it was going up. Here it's going down. Then the following year in 2014, we have into the month of July, that was being essentially a top of the relief rally that we had in the midst of a bear market, which is insane. So what I'm thinking, and this is something we could entertain early today in this Red Pill podcast, is does this mean that our next major altcoin rally is heading into July or August next year, heading into that next solar eclipse in the solar cycle? And that we are currently in the process of bottoming between now and next month at the start of 2026 for a specific baskets of altcoins, I should say, because not all of them are going to do the same things in tandem. For example, we saw at the Q4 time of last year, XRP, HBAR, XDC, Stellar Lumens were all doing really, really well, but all of the privacy coins were doing nothing. Now we have HBAR, XDC, XRP, and Stellar Lumens going down, but we see all the privacy coins have been going up. You understand what's happening? We are in a balancing effect. And I think that's a really important and fascinating, actually. It's very fascinating to me how it's all balancing out the way that it is. So, all things considered, I'm just mentioning this concept for altcoins, even though we're looking back at the 2012 through 2014 Bitcoin chart and drawing those comparisons, because back then in 2012 through 2014, Bitcoin moved, of course, more like an altcoin would move today. So that's one thing for us to consider, especially with August, as I mentioned moments ago, being a total solar eclipse and arguably the start of our next solar cycle. So rewind back a year ago where I was talking about the time frame of March this year. I was talking about it a year and a half before we got there. So when you're hearing me talk about August in 2026, this is not something new for Waters Above. This is what we always do. I was talking about April of 2023, a year before we got there, because I knew about the eclipses. So it helped me get more specific on understanding pivot points. And I believe we've just now crossed through a major pivot point, but it's not fully over yet, especially for those people that are giving a lot of energy to one specific basket of altcoins. And that was why I made that comment a little bit earlier, because you'll have to consider what basket of altcoins you're paying attention to. Memes move with memes. The quote-unquote ISO 200 stuff moves in tandem, and then we have privacy coins moving in tandem. We have stuff tied specifically to Ethereum and smart contracts moving in tandem. We have like the OG DeFi shit moving in tandem. You know what I mean. The ones that you don't know what I mean, then don't even burden yourself with overthinking things right now. Generally, the only thing we need to continue to focus on is Bitcoin as like the North Star of this whole operation and Bitcoin dominance. And of course, we could start getting a little fancier and look at what's happening with USDT and USDC dominance, sure. But I'm going to make sure that you're all kept on track throughout this very confusing, chaotic, and difficult to navigate cycle, because this is for sure the most difficult cycle to navigate since I would say this year of the horse bear market. Like this thing, 2014 into 2016 was rough. So we talked about this too, where you go from top to this local bottom, that was 632 days. So the people that are looking at our last cycle and they're looking how it took 1 year for Bitcoin to bottom, I think we need to slow down here with the way that we're analyzing this and the way that we're quote unquote predicting what's to come. And I do have a whole section of today's red pill where I'm going to talk about that, give you the specifics on my thoughts. But let's get back to this. Now, of course, that would be pretty messed up considering 90% or more invest. And what I mean by pretty messed up is if we were to have an altcoin rally into July of next year. That'd be pretty messed up considering that 90% or more of investors, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe at least 90% at this point, because of time capitulation, they are expecting Bitcoin to repeat the 2022 bear market. Exactly like it happened back then. And that we're somewhere like here. So it's why I keep this chart open often. This fractal is just this fractal from here. This is what about 90% expects right now, especially because some of the biggest YouTubers in the space are effectively calling for this. And if this were to happen, this would mean that we're repeating exactly the 2022 bear market, and that would mean Bitcoin will be bottoming in effectively October 2026, 1 year after topping out in from October this year, right? We've all heard this. This is not like magic witchcraft. This is like what people are now committing to. So one thing I want to say to those who believe in this situation, if you believe in it, is a reminder that back in 2021, when we were in the month of November, when we were within the month of November, moving into December, if you were actually in the market back then and you were paying attention to the content creators actively, then you'll know literally no one at that time was talking about how Bitcoin will be at the bear market bottom lows in November 2022. No one. Of course, there was opinions at that time over here, whether we were in a bear market or not during December 2021 when we had this first initial correction, but there was definitely not this whole confident, I know Bitcoin will crash from here until 1 year from the top energy that we're seeing all over the place right now. But I'm sure many of you do remember the confidence that everyone had around Bitcoin not, quote unquote, not being able to hit a new all-time high before the block rewards halving, based on how it was yet to do that in the past cycles. And we did. Bitcoin literally did hit a new, and it was insanely bullish before the halving. So Bitcoin literally hit a new all-time high with one of the most bullish moves that we've seen in this whole range before the halving. And that's the same cycle we're currently in right now, where we've yet to have a dramatic drop-off in Bitcoin dominance leading to an alt season, which is also something that we've seen in every past cycle until this one. And on top of that, we are, quote unquote, so far watching the 4-year cycle play out. You've heard this a billion gazillion times. And I'm not acting this way, guys, because I'm trying to be like talking about anybody that you might be following. That's not my approach here. I'm not actively consuming any content. I'm just getting, everyone's bringing stuff to my attention. So I am really focused on this new project that I have that I'm creating, that I'm launching very soon. I don't have that free time to go check in with what every analyst believes. I'm focused on my own shit, but I've been hearing from you guys the opinion. And of course, I go on X to share posts or whatever I do over there, and I see the noise, right? So, because we are so far following this quote unquote 4-year cycle, bears are ultra confident right now. And with that confidence, the future predictions become even more confident. And then all of a sudden, everyone is a genius and knows exactly what's going to happen next, right? That's how a lot of people feel. Anyone who was bearish a couple months ago, they now feel like those are the geniuses. This happens every time. Happens every time. The consensus is now that 2026 will be the worst crypto bear market and potentially ever, because the 4-year cycle is playing out, and Bitcoin will have an 80% correction from here until October 2026. And that means many altcoins that are already down over 80%, which, by the way, there are many are down 80% from their local tops. That would mean if Bitcoin still has, let me see, let's do the maths here. That's only 50%. So yeah, guys, Bitcoin's gonna be 20K. And then that means Bitcoin also has this much to go, another 72 fucking percent from here. So every altcoin goes to zero. And then there's going to be people, of course, very bearish people are like rubbing their hands together like Mr. Burns, and they're like, oh, I was right because I sold or whatever. This is just always how it is. This is how it was over here. This is literally how it was over here. This is how people were acting during the C19 crash. They were like, I'm glad I didn't get into crypto before this shit happened. What do you say? So guys, like, what I want out of Waters Above and the mastermind community that we have here is to become self-reliant, where you're not waiting around to find who's the perfect analyst, the perfect trader, the perfect system, the perfect whatever. Like, you need to realize that this is something that requires experience. And even the most experienced people make mistakes or miscalculations or whatever you want to call it, right? What matters most is what happens after you fall down. Do you get back up and do you keep going? It's about not quitting. And I saw this cycle over here test a lot of people's souls. I saw a lot of awesome content creators over here give up because the market got the best of them. Because when the confidence kicks in, people start doing shit that they don't really, it's no longer logical. It's just emotional. And I feel like that's what we're dealing with lately, where we're 2 to 3 months deep into extreme fear. And now everybody who's on the right side of this, which, by the way, it's a coin toss, it's either up or down, right? If you're on the right side of this, you're perceived as the one who's right. And that's kind of overtaking everything. And it's not investing anymore then, which is funny, right? It's funny to say, but it's no longer investing at that point. It's just, well, what we're faced with now. So getting back to this, the consensus is that 2026 will be the worst crypto bear market ever because the 4-year cycle is playing out. Bitcoin has, as I showed you, 72 more percent to correct, and then all altcoins will effectively get wiped out because of that, right? That's the consensus for 2026. And the more bearish everyone gets about 2026, and I'll speak for myself, but the more bearish everyone gets about 2026, it's starting to make me very bullish for 2026. Even though I don't care about the bulls or the bears, I'm a wolf, y'all know that. But of course, I'm doing my best right now to not play the game of being contrarian for the sake of being contrarian, but I must admit it's getting really noisy here in crypto land. And that's where I practice presence and preserve my energy to build, to create, to bring my vision to life, which is the only way I can truly elevate my life. And that's what 2026 is going to be all about for me. So it's the reason I'm really excited to launch my new platform soon. So for any one of you that are looking to elevate your life and discover your people, I'll be sharing something with you all soon here for our mastermind community that's going to be an absolute game changer. Stay tuned for that update in a couple weeks. But to wrap up what I was mentioning a moment ago regarding the consensus for crypto in 2026, I'm just personally starting to expect something we haven't seen before. Just like this whole cycle here into 2025, with the exception of kind of what Bitcoin's been doing, has turned out to be something we haven't seen before. And even Bitcoin, it's kind of mimicking 2017 in a lot of ways, which is making me even more bullish. because we've yet to have a euphoric blow off top for Bitcoin. But that's a side note. So, in some ways, it feels like this year, 2025, was also quite similar to 2020. And we've talked about this before. So I know you've heard me say this 100 times now, but I still feel it's important to keep reminding everyone of the similarities, especially since we're now just weeks away from New Year's and we have even more data to prove this. We have even more data to back up what I'm saying regarding the similarities between 2020 and here, 2025. Starting with the fact that what I mentioned over a year ago before Trump even became president regarding him ending his first term with an event in March, which was here, ending his first term with the C19 event in March, and my expectations for him to become president again, and if he were to in fact become president again, which he did, that I'd expect there to be an event in March of 2025 to start his second term. Essentially, the opposite of how his first term ended would be how his second term would begin. So we had the C19 event in March 2020 in his last year as a president, the first time around. And this is what led me to expect an event for March 2025, which, as we're all aware, it ended up being the tariff crash. And yes, I know it lasted until the first week of April, but the fact I said this in several Red Pills YouTube videos, live streams, and even interviews that I was invited onto over 1 year before it happened, it shows this decoding system we're utilizing here is powerful. And of course, this wasn't the only thing I considered with regards to that expectation for March this year, because actually the main theme behind what that expectation I had was the start of the lunar cycle, which was on the lunar eclipse in March. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about that, but now that we're all the way here at the end of 2025, that's not the only parallel that we've had with the year of 2020. We also had a V-shaped recovery after that crash, and then went on to hit new all-time highs in both the stock market and in the gold price. Let me quickly pull up the S&P 500 chart, and it's crazy to look at this thing. C19 crash, new all-time high, tariff crash, new all-time high, and pushing deeper into price discovery. By the way, that's where we were in the end of 2020. Deep into price discovery, just like we are right now. It's scary similar to right now, following that V-shaped recovery. And I believe this chop that we're seeing over here is what we're in the midst of completing right now. And maybe we do get a weird push into the first couple weeks of January. Who the hell cares? Doesn't matter. It's all about where's the liquidity, okay? And I think that's where you might want to start listening to those analysts. Like if you're to follow anyone, follow the macro guys that are aware of liquidity. I know some of them are memed out because they put way too much prana into the M2 money supply shit. This is why I didn't talk much about it, because that got super popular and people started kind of getting a little too confident that that was to continue to work. No offense, but again, just when it comes to how to navigate this market, liquidity is everything, and that's going to be very helpful for you in your journey, understanding that more. Now, I believe funny to say this, but I think the secret sauce that I have in my work here is that I'm able to identify why they're putting the liquidity into the market at the times why they're taking it out at the times that they are. They are running the market on gematria, numerology, and astrology, and that's how they're running the money. So the money has to go somewhere, right? And it's somewhere on that risk curve. So getting back to this, crazy similar how we were into price discovery in Q4 of 2020 as we're in price discovery at the end Q4 of 2025. And even the breakout in the Russell looks very, very similar to what we have right now. Russell 2000. So we have the C19 crash. We have this major correction right there. It's kind of a dip. I believe that's that dip. And the one that we're in right now is the one that we're concluding soon. And as I said, if it leads into the first week of the first month of the year, who gives a shit? It does not matter, because if this is to come after, that's all that matters. And this is a technical back test. This was a bunch of, I kind of going off right now, but this is helpful. We have all this chop, up thrust into distribution. We have a very, very important back test of where the failed rally was before this major black swan event. Test, 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 lift off, and then during this bullshit, we just back tested the same level. That's all we did. Now we've broken out and we are again back testing the resistance that we had in the last cycle. This is insanely bullish. Insanely bullish. And the printing press has just been turned back on. So I'm not trying to hype you guys up. I don't really care. Again, most of my energy in my life is going towards creating something, building, and it's way bigger than crypto. I'm treating crypto as I always have, which is an investment tertiary in my overall wealth plan. And I advise you all do the same. When you make crypto investing the priority in your life, you will become chained to the block and your life will be misery. Trust me. This is why I don't put out a lot of videos. It's why I make one podcast a week. I have one day a week, where I put a lot of energy into this. And then I try to go back to the stuff that's more wholesome, the stuff that allows me to feel more centered. That's what I think is special about Waters Above, is that it's not this every day, 2 videos a day, every single day, crypto is my life energy. It's not what we are. It's never been that way. And we're approaching 5 years. So if that resonates with you, amazing. That doesn't resonate with you, there's a lot of people out there that make a lot of YouTube videos about crypto every 5 seconds. It's a lot to pick. Enjoy. But getting back to this, I feel like this setup is incredibly bullish. Then when we check in on the altcoins, and this is the fun section of today, we're going to look at HBAR. And I just want to zoom in on HBAR in 20. So when the Russell was breaking out, listen closely. When the S&P 500 was already deep into price discovery, when the Russell was already breaking out, look at where HBAR was at the end of 2020. Do I need to say anything? Let's look at where Dogecoin was at the end of 2020. Actually, let me pull up some fibs. So I can show you. Go to like a 3-day. So we can see 2 cycles side by side. Okay, you see the 382 fib, and you see the date that it's over is December 29th. 1 second. See that? December 29th. Right there. 382 fib. I know you can't see it, but that's the 382 fib. We're effectively a little bit below it, but who cares? I won't say anything else. Let's look at XLM. All right, it's a little noisy. I'll make it easier for you to see. This is the end of 2020. By the way, we had a major correction into the end of the year, about 50%, and that's January 1st candle right there. But the deeper we went was around December 23rd, the deepest. So this thing was having a major, even though it did have a little bit of a breakout, major correction into the end of the year. Pretty much back testing this little, what I would call a SOS. So we have a spring in Wyckoff, we have a test in Wyckoff, then we have an SOS, and this is a backup phase. This is a very technical back test, similar to what I was showing you on the Russell. So we have a level of resistance, then we have a back test before expansion. So here, we sort of did that on this automatic rally over here. It doesn't matter if we continue to do it. Who cares? We are correcting into the end of the year, and there's probably a lot of really good reasons why that's happening. I've even been thinking about personally doing some de-risk just because of I should be very careful when I say this, but I don't mind being open with you guys. Like, I have a particular corporate structure here in the US, and the way that I like to, the way that I've structured my business, it's not a generic LLC. So the way that it's structured allows me to take losses, and those losses have a carry forward up to, I believe it's 3 to 5 years. So if I was to sell any losses right now, but then in 2026 we were to have a relief rally and I made a lot on capital gains, that would off the losses right now would offset the gains that are to come. And that is a strategy that could be very useful for people. But not everybody has the corporation setup that I have, structured the way I have it set up. Also, not everybody has business or enterprise crypto exchanges, which is something I've been talking about for 2 years now. So this is why I talk so highly of becoming a business owner. Because when you become a business owner, you start opening up to all these different avenues. And I was a business owner before I created Waters Above. So this is not like a new thing for me. Of course, I've expanded since, but it's because I've put more work in, I put more effort in, and I've started to tap into more of my skills, which is another piece that I think we speak quite highly to here. So again, that's where the new project that I'm launching is going to be so powerful, because a lot of people are going to be able to avoid the common pitfalls that come with just finding out about investing, then going all in on investing in these markets, and then they forget to invest in themselves. And then they have no cash flow and they have no avenue to do some of these more fancy moves when it comes to offsetting your tax liability. So we're going to be teaching a lot about that too when we launch the new platform. But getting back to this, looking bad into the end of 2025, looking pretty damn rough into the end of 2020. And lastly, one of my favorites is the Solana chart, because you're going to see over here that Solana topped in effectively September, right there at the end of August into September. And then it had a correction into like the day before Christmas. Funny enough, it had a correction into like what would be the like the end of the solstice week, and it's called Solana, But we just did the same thing. We had a local top in September and we've been correcting into the solstice. And by the way, if you haven't noticed yet, all of these examples that I just shared with you, all of the examples we've just reviewed, they were all leading up to what was considered the last alt season that we had. So it's just some food for thought. And let me be crystal clear with you all right now. This is not me saying that I would expect an alt season exactly like we had at the start of 2021. That is not what I'm expecting, although I'd welcome it if it showed up at my doorstep. It's still not what I'm expecting at this time. And first, I'll tell you why, and then I'll tell you what I am expecting, because I'm sure most of you care about that. First off, the reason why I'm not expecting an insane alt season move in Q1 2026, the same as it went in 2021, is because of two reasons. And the main one is, if you pay attention to the current consensus, which is that, what did I say, 90%? Let me be even more conservative. Let me be kinder and say 70% of retail investors believe that Bitcoin is in a bear market and there'll be no alt season. Then what do the other 30% believe? Well, we could call them like perma bulls, but I don't want to do that. The remainder of the bunch are the ones who are expecting an insane alt season in Q1 next year, or they're expecting a crazy bull rally, maybe even all of 2026 to be bullish, because they're learning about liquidity and what's going on in macro, etc. So my reasoning is as simple as the market maker knows what everyone expects, and then it throws its pitches accordingly. So if you're expecting a curveball, it throws a changeup. And if you expect a changeup, it throws a Nolan Ryan fastball. Okay? That's why it seems, especially in crypto, that we have the most polarizing seasonality, whether it be an insanely bullish Q4 or a devastating and depressing Q4. Same goes for moving into Q2, with the extremes we get every March and April every year. So after gathering all of these thoughts, I personally feel like we're going to get a mix, and what would be the least expected outcome is a major move up for altcoins, like a noticeable major move up for altcoins into July, with the recovery starting between now and Q1 of next year, as early as next month. And we'd get a nice move up into February and March for the altcoins. but not necessarily what that other group would be expecting. Like, not necessarily the real move up. This would confuse so many investors if they pulled it off this way. Because right now, what most are expecting is for us to just keep crashing more and more. We already talked about this. But there's clearly been several broken patterns this cycle, and with the final total lunar eclipse of our lunar cycle happening at the beginning of March, this is why I'm also expecting something quote unquote different for this so-called bear market that we're in right now for crypto. And for those who do truly feel like we're gonna do the same, well, I believe it's important for us to check out the others market cap chart, which has something powerful. I think that will help us all navigate this better. So everything is off right now on this chart. I'm going to go to the daily. By the way, the others market cap chart is crypto market cap, excluding Bitcoin, Ethereum, and the other top 10 crypto projects. And if we measure from November 9th, 2021, right around here, to the bottom, around, call it December 28th, you're looking at about 414 days. And from there, we had a notable pivot, and that was technically the bottom. Yeah, we did have this little kind of move, but like this was a clear pivot. So remember, 414 days. And if we do the same with the prior cycle from January till the lows, I think we want to go to pivot, I think is even more important. It's right about there, like 396, 397 days, right around 400 days from top to pivot, okay? Another thing to mention about specifically 397 days for those that are decoders in our community, that is 1 year, 1 month, and 1 day. So you have the 111 code. It's also 1 year, 4 weeks, and 4 days. That's the 144 code, which is 12 squared. What else? It's also exactly 13 months. And 13 is a key number for decoders. As if 12 represents the disciples or the months, for example, then 13 represents you, the creator. And we actually have 13 full moons in a year, not 12 months. It's 13 full months, just so you're aware. But anyways, if we measure from the current peak on this chart, which was December 7th, and we add 397 days going along with our last example, that brings you to around January 7th, actually, if you were to include the end date. And this is not including the end date, but if it were to be including the end date, regardless, it's landing right there on that key date of January 7th. Now, it's actually really mind-blowing because I've been talking about January 6th into January 7th for almost 2 months now. I've of course been bringing it up a lot in the last couple red pills, and the reason is because this year we've been following this 47 code a lot, the 47 code, and Bitcoin just recently crashed for exactly 47 days into November 21st, which was within the 47th week of the year. So then I took from November 21st and I added 47 days, and then it lands on January 7th. The same date that I just showed you is connected to the current top of the altcoin market chart, also when the last time we were euphoric. So that can't just be a coincidence. But now let's quickly check in on our first example's time frame, measuring from the same date of January 7th over 414 days, and that brings you into around January 25th. Guys, this is literally a month away from now. I just took 2 cycles. I measured back from when they were euphoric to when we had a pivot. Like, I'm speechless. So honestly, this wouldn't be the first, just so we could quickly start moving on to another way. This wouldn't even be the first December on record that altcoins looked this bad after almost a full year of sideways. I mean, it was the case in December 2015. You can see right there, December 2015, we had a pivot for all the altcoins. Look at 2016, December, pivot for all of the altcoins. Then we had the bear market lows of 2018 were in the month of December. Look at December 2019. I mean, we technically had a pivot. Even if you take the black swan away, that was the bullish pivot. Of course, we just had like a couple of weeks of ultra pain, but that was the true pivot. It was in December. Also, look at 2020. 2020 December. Yeah, like we weren't looking so bad, but there was definitely suppression here as this started grinding up to the exact time frame of December 2020, and there was your pivot. So I think this is powerful. Look, the bear market lows, December 2022. The last bear market, guys, December 2022 was the bottom. It's another key example. And for those who consider that May of 2021 as the euphoric top for altcoins in the last alt cycle, which I personally do, by the way, then I want you to see how from the May 2021 peak until the end of June, the most notable part of the crash, it was also 400 days. And the reason why I'm putting emphasis on June 2022 is because when Ethereum bottomed in the last cycle, it was there. Let me show you. So we're taking from this like syringe top on May 10th all the way to the cycle low for ETH. 402 days on the nose. Perfectly fitting our 400-day theme that we've been focusing on here in today's red pill. And if we consider our last somewhat euphoric top for the altcoins here in crypto land back on December 7th, 2024, over 400 days, it's around January 11th. This is literally 3 weeks away, guys. I mean, let me be vulnerable with you all and say, is this not something we should be paying attention to? And I'll be a real one with you all and say the main reason I am considering this right now is because we never had price discovery for Ethereum or Solana or XRP or Dogecoin or Cardano. Those are all top 10 projects, by the way. Only BNB experienced price discovery, and likely the reason is because they're just liquidating everyone playing with leverage on their exchange and then stacking up on BNB afterwards. That's what they're up to. That's like the mafia. Anyways, as of right now, it feels like we're in peak despair here in crypto land, and it's been a while since we've even been close to euphoria. So this is the reason why I feel like we're coming to the end of that energy soon, and that we're not in the start of that energy. Personally, this is how I feel. Pretty much everything I've collected points to 2026 being a bottoming year for crypto, and for many projects, that bottom could likely be as early as next month. And lastly, for those of you that are more into macro, you know that the Fed is turning on the printing press as we speak. They're already injecting liquidity into this market, and QT is over. The tightening cycle is done. And that means we're coming up against an environment that we haven't been in since literally 2021, post C19 crash, which could lead us to a situation where the market shifts more risk on. And since Bitcoin has already had its fun in the sun, that means the altcoins are up next. And I know this sounds like hopium, and I'm purely just saying this in regards to the macro setup. So with all of that being said, it's the perfect time to pivot over into these charts, do some more traditional technical analysis, check in where we're at. Since this week, we had the Bank of Japan's interest rate hike now behind us, and that whole move could have very well been priced in during the correction we had leading up to the exact date of that event this past Friday, December 19th. So we just want to check in on Bitcoin, weekly close. We haven't had a huge update actually for Bitcoin, mostly because we're still doing what I expected. The 47 days of sideways, or what we were calling scenario number 1 So what I would like to see is scenario number one become scenario two, become scenario three, in kind of that order. And maybe if you guys are interested in what the hell I'm talking about right there, we could kind of entertain that next week, you know. But I've talked about scenario number one being 47 days of sideways, and that ending or concluding around January 6th into January 7th. That sideways was specifically between 80K to 100K, and we're doing that. So we're getting that sideways chop at these lows, holding structural support. I do think that they're going to do something weird soon, but it's just been so damn bearish. It's like the weird thing would be the bullish thing, right? So it's just been a lot of pain here in the market, specifically for altcoin holders. And that's kind of when something comes out of nowhere and gets very positive very quick. So lots of things not looking so good, purely judging off the moving averages, but we are sitting here on the 21 EMA. That is nice to see. Let's see where the 8 is. Okay, so like we haven't actually gotten bought back to the 8 on the monthly. We are sitting here on the 21 on the monthly, 21 EMA. It's typical that we pop back up to that. And if we see resistance on that, like we did over here, that's when things can start to get dramatically worse. But this will be our first time in this cycle since we flipped full-blown bullish that we've been even on the 21 monthly. So that's something I would definitely keep in mind. And that means that 100K Bitcoin is likely. And there's nothing wrong with rotating out of Bitcoin when it gets back to those levels. Like, honestly, I think that's what most people's play is going to be. And a lot of people also lately have been saying, well, everybody's just going to exit the market all at the same time when they get a second chance. Guys, that's not what people did in the last cycle or the cycle before that or the cycle before that. No one takes those chances because no one is able to actually make moves when the market is really doing something. They love panic selling and they love FOMOing tops. So when it comes to like market go up from here, I think you're going to see FOMO. I don't think everyone's just all of a sudden going to become fucking smart. People are dumb when markets are actually doing something. It's when they're choppy and boring and like there's just time capitulation. That's where people pontificate about what they're going to do. Very rarely do they do anything though, when the actual market gives them what they've so-called, predicted. So as we're in this current structure, one thing I would like to see is getting back above that 55 moving average on the daily chart. Flipping above the 55 and then seeing the 8 cross above the 55 for me would be a powerful move. But for now, we're just kind of holding the range between 80 and 93. Also, the fact that the 55 is now touching where our local resistance has been, that's something else to keep in mind. Oh, one more other thing to mention, guys, that's clear is all the algos running this lately. We can see over here, look, it came up into 9 a.m. Then we have 10 a.m. rejection. 9 a.m., 10 a.m. rejection. 10 a.m. rejection. This is Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And then here, it was a 9 a.m. move down, just like it was the other day. So we have Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, all based on time and price, because we were at the same level every single time. So what that tells me is if Bitcoin can start clearing this 90K, then this whole nonsense is over with. And everything has been based on time. Now, I understand that's around when the stock market opens for the day, but this is a little silly how it gets bought up at the start and then immediately rejected. That to me feels like, yeah, very fishy. Anyways, Bitcoin's looking not the best, of course. We're aware of this. ETH holding 3,000, not horrible to see. One thing I do like is we are still building this inverse head and shoulders. So we have left shoulder, head, right shoulder, and we're doing effectively the same shit that we were doing all over here, which by the way was in Q4. And we're also back testing this resistance. And it was a chop area, effectively. This is also the area where it was like make or break in the last cycle. So you can see that ETH has been treating this as a new support, and I really like to see that. Let's call it $2,700, okay? Around 2,600, 2,700. That's been an area of interest. When we crashed through it, we came straight back to it. And then recently, after we've had this kind of false rally and what could be considered a bull trap, we've come right back to the same levels and it's been holding. So I like to see this. ETH is looking good. And like I told you, like in the last cycle, when you take from this euphoric moment to these lows, it's about 400 days. And when you look at this euphoric moment over here for the entire crypto altcoin market over to where we are now, we're super close to that time frame. So this again could be a notable pivot. The only thing though is we don't immediately just go up. This type of chop could still be in the cards. And that's why this for me feels very realistic, that we're just in the midst of this right now. And then we're going to have one more move up. And that move up might only go to here in late February or March. Then we could get another correction. And then we have our final like real move up into July before another notable correction. We'll see how it goes because each project is doing kind of its own thing right now. We haven't actually seen everything sync up. I think we're finishing up the syncing up phase. And that was what I mentioned earlier when I said, look at what we were doing in November, December of last year with HBAR, XLM, XRP, etc. And then what were the privacy coins doing? Absolutely nothing. But then this year we've had the privacy coins breaking out around this time last year. Or this year, based on last year. That balancing act, I think, is in the process of completing soon. So let's look at XRP really quickly. Again, not a whole lot to share. We did actually, though, get a move below 180. I told you guys my scenario number one for XRP is chop between, what was it, like 230 and 180. So we did get slightly below, but who cares? It was bought up immediately. We're back at 193. So we're still playing out scenario number one until proven otherwise. And a couple of daily candles or 4-hour candles punching below doesn't matter to me. I do like the fact that we've backtested the April lows because that's telling me like, okay, we are now holding this level, but it's getting close. This plane needs to get pulled up soon. So I've already talked about this, how we've now been spending an uncomfortable amount of time in this particular setup. It's time for us to make one more move. Like I said, into next month is more likely a bottoming phase, especially for something that's been spending one whole year holding this new level. It's just back testing this macro automatic rally from 2021, which was again the most euphoric time in the last alt cycle, but it was not euphoric feeling for XRP because XRP barely hit an all-time high. So here we're kind of flipping that and we're back testing the level that gave us our top of the last cycle. I would consider that bullish personally. Now, really quickly, I'm going to check in with this SPX 6900. I don't know what the hell this is. But yeah, so this definitely paints a different picture. The data that I had, I don't believe it was including this at all. So we have all of this last cycle, and then we have one major correction that kind of pivots into September. Here we had one second, sorry. This is a very difficult chart for me to look at. This is a little better. Okay. One thing I want to do here, I haven't thought to do it because I'm now redoing the TA. It's just a where are we on this? Wow. Did we hit the 5-spot or 6-spot extension? So insane. So, okay, so this was a big winner if you got in 2024. It's still up insane amounts. So this gave you a really good amount of time, 1 full year to get in. I have no idea what this project is. So yeah, this definitely paints a different picture. But what it also tells me right now is we're at like a crucial price, right? A crucial price, because we only have a couple of weeks below this price. And then once you break through that floor of around 24 cents, you can free fall all the way down to 2 cents again, which would be an 80% correction. And that is not what everyone wants to hear. But just think about the fact that this thing pumped through this entire price level and it has no volume between 50 cents all the way down to 3 cents. There's no volume built because it was just pumped straight through. So it got overextended. And when things get overextended like that, you have to be careful because if supports can't hold, you can absolutely come back and fill all of this out. So if you're somebody who bought at all back in 2023 or even most of the first part of 2024, I would de-risk if you haven't yet because you're in a really good position. I mean, even if you bought near the top of this range, you're still looking at multiple 1,000% profits. I would consider it silly to just continue to hold on for the sake of it. This thing is up, you know? And that move that we have right there in July 2025, it's not a move of security. This shows us that this was engineered to be a false breakout rally. It's a bull trap to the top. They're very elusive, where you get slightly higher highs and then you start breaking all the way down to the 236 fib. Like, that's not great. So this correction already is somewhere around 80%. That's Bitcoin's whole bear market from the last 3 cycles, right? So we know this is an altcoin. We know this did very well in the past. My advice here, not advice here, because you should do what you want to do, but what I would personally be doing on this is taking profits if I got in this territory over there. Because anything below that, below 24 cents, this can fall just as quick as it rose. And you don't want to be caught up in that. So from a technical perspective, though, this is holding a support. It's getting very close to a sketchy level where, of course, it could swipe below 47 straight to 24 like it did during the March correction. You could see this move only took a couple of days. I mean, in a day. Is that a 50% fucking candle in one day? Oh my God. Let me show you what the hell I'm talking about. So this right here was a 19% correction followed by a 26% correction. So that whole move from the price we're trading at right now, just look at where the green dotted line is. That whole move was 2 days. It dropped 50%. Okay. So that's what could happen if we don't hold this level that we're effectively at right now. It could be 2 days of just blood. And now the worst situation would be, what if retail investors start getting freaked out? Then this happens the same way it happened going up. So I hope you guys appreciate this honest kind of second take on SPX 69000000. It's not the most beautiful looking chart, but it was probably in the right place at the right time, in the right community. And that's all you need to get something like this. It's kind of very reminiscent of Caspa, which I haven't checked out in a long time. So maybe soon I'll check in on that. That was one of the big successes of this bull run. And then ultimately the wisdom of taking profits or de-risking if you're doing well on this, especially in this type of environment, this really sketchy environment that we're in right now. Okay, now we're looking at Ondo. All right, so Ondo is doing something that I was kind of warning about with the last project we were just looking at, this SPX project. It's now breaking below this critical support level, which could be driving it down to 20 cents again. Why not? So you really, really want to be careful on these. And this is one of those projects, along with another project that we're going to cover later in today's podcast. It's called Sui. Those two kind of in tandem became quite popular in even our community. So one thing that I'm sure you guys heard me talking about that I was not so happy about was this move up to the 1618, which was perfectly in alignment with the last time we had euphoria in the market. I don't have this I don't invest in this project, but a lot of people were like kind of convincing me to get into it. And it's not that I'm like glad that I didn't. It's just when I see a move into the 1618, I don't want to buy. Like, rarely. There has to be a big reason. And since it's hit the 1618, it's now had an 80% correction. And that correction has become even worse as of this past 3 days. So it's leaving, this liquidity is leaving Ondo and it's going into stables. It's going into Satoshis. I believe Bitcoin dominance is already back at 60%, which is not weird to me. It's almost 60%. That's not weird to me because December is one of the strongest months for Bitcoin. Bitcoin dominance. Sorry, Bitcoin dominance, not necessarily just Bitcoin. But all right. So there's not a whole lot that this is going to hang on to, guys. I mean, we don't have much data. There's only 1 month of data below this price. I wouldn't even count what happened on October 10th or whatever. Like, we're just filling out that wick, and a lot of projects are starting to fill out that wick almost in its totality. That's not great. Now the question could be though, well, there's the person in the community that's like, I love this project. I know a lot about this project. It's a category winner. And then we could say to them, well, okay, well, if you want to disregard everything that I'm talking about, then venture capital is the way to go regarding a little position in Ondo, maybe 1 or 2% of your portfolio. If we were to effectively bounce from here, just to make it back into this last level of resistance, which was a key level of resistance, is about 180%. This is probably another reason why I didn't go with this project, because even if it were to go all the way back to the peak, the current all-time high, I just don't think that's good enough RO. Like, it's great. Don't get me wrong, 450% is amazing, but like, it's just not enough ROI for me to be buying into a chart that I don't feel confident in, and something that doesn't have enough chart history. Now, correct me if I'm wrong here, but there might be an older chart than Ondo. I don't know. This is the best one I could find, but as of right now, I don't love this. It does look like a kind of like a fucked up Head and Shoulders that is effectively playing out since it broke below 63 cents. This is a sell for me, or just a hold off on for me. I would not be investing in this at this time because it could definitely slide deeper. And if it were to have a relief rally, I mean, you really want to look to 78 cents. So it's a double. Like, I mean, it's just not enough ROI for me to get excited personally. Let's keep it moving. Flare. This is another one that I would very much avoid. I've talked a lot about Flare and some of the other things that get brought up in the conversation, such as Songbird. And for me, and I'm just getting this out there immediately, it's like you're just avoiding investing in the category winner, which for me, the only reason you care about Flare or things like Songbird is because of XRP. People put a lot of money into stuff like this when they could have just gotten more XRP, you know? So if you bought the exact bottom in October 2023 and you sold the exact top on Flare, you made 500%. Today you're also down still almost 80% if you made, or if you bought that move. Most people buy the tops, right? But you're talking 450%. Now let's quickly look at where XRP is. I mean, if you bought the C19 lows, you're an absolute legend, but we're looking at October 2023. So right now, even, which isn't the best time for XRP, right now, if you bought October 2023, you're up almost 300% today. And that's not even the full, that's not the best move you could have gotten. I mean, if you would have bought from the absolute pivot low, I mean, technically you'd have even lower prices. But let's just be fair here. Let's be fair here and pull off 35 cents. And be also fair and have like around $3 on the nose. That's 750%. So you could have also had multiple taps on that. And then also when you zoom out, you could have had way better entries. So this is a much different looking situation, and also down 80% from that high that came in back at the beginning of the year. It's not always about comparing. I'm not trying to just isolate the comparison, but the point being made is you only knew about Flare or Songbird because of this XRP project. Therefore, you should have just invested probably more money in XRP. That's the takeaway here. So I don't love spending too much time doing a detailed analysis on these types of projects, but I'm here to say that we haven't looked at this one in a long time, and I'm not surprised by this price action. It's just continuing to chop in this major horizontal trading range. It had multiple touch points of resistance and support, and now it's kind of in the process of having a kickback where it's a bearish kickback into a true support level at 1 cent. So 1 cent or 2 cents is fair value on this thing. And there's no reason for it to continue to hold. So it could definitely go right back down to the October lows while everything else is looking very good. Seriously, it could go down to the October lows while everything else is looking for. I mean, look, this thing had a high back in February 2024, a lower high in November 2024. Well, XRP was going up 700%. This thing went up 200%. So this is just a big distraction, in my opinion. I will leave it at that. I know it's not the most fun TA that I could share with you, but it's just, I have to be honest here. This to me is really not worth it. It's in price discovery to the downside, and the whole flare situation to me is just a scam. I mean, it's like a breeding ground for scammers. Look at anybody who pretends to be me on Discord or any social media platforms. One of the number one ways they're able to have an effective scam is by selling people on this flare airdrop bullshit. It's nonsense. It's actually doing more harm than it was to ever do any good. And I feel very confident in saying that. To me, it's just like a parasite. So let's move on. I know it's a rough take and probably going to bother some people, but who cares? Someone's got to say it. All right, damn. We're looking at Engine Coin. This one is now back to the 2018 lows. Funny enough, that was in the month of December. This is the C19 crash. So this is one of those examples of stuff that's in dire straits. You know, it's like really not in the best position. But I have a couple of lines to add that could be educational nonetheless. We have major point right there, right here, and then one at the bottom that I want to point out. And none of, it's not good. That's not good. I'm not, okay. A true range should have, and then a heart line. So this could also be accomplished very rapidly with just a parallel channel. But I'll go ahead and I'll do that just for you guys. Stack this in the back. And you see a majority of the trading was through here. And we, of course, had our major euphoric moment into April of 2021, right? That was the last true alt season. And since this is probably down 95%, oh my God, 99%. So this has lost all of its value. That's a red flag immediately. Literally, this is a red flag. But furthermore, what's also problematic about this is you just don't know when it's going to stop. You don't know, like now that it's all the way back at the bear market of 2018, it again shows you that like this was a very speculative bubble, and not everything is gonna recover along with Bitcoin. Not everything's gonna recover along with the category winners, which I consider XRP to be one of. I mean, if you just zoom out, let me just show you this so that way nobody could give me any hate. But this is the bottom of 2018. This is the black swan event. So yes, our bottoming structure for this particular altcoin was completed by 2020. But look at where we are today. Almost 1,000% up. Excuse me, I should have muted my mic. I apologize. But then if you look at where we were in 2021, we weren't nearly as euphoric as Engine was. We also didn't need to have a 99% correction since. So this was a very speculative move. And this right here, to me, it doesn't feel like speculation. This feels like true value. Now, I'm not saying XRP's fair value is $1.95, but it feels like the investors agree that it is. Whilst this, there is no agreement on what this could be. Hence, it's down, 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 down. So this is a big lesson for everybody, including even myself, because I've made a couple of really not so nice venture capital decisions, but those were again 1% of my portfolio or 1.5% or 0.5%. So I answered this question a couple days ago inside of the Discord. Somebody asked, what are my thoughts on like any positions that are in a loss right now? And it's like, well, you have to craft a portfolio where you're aware that you put a majority of your speculation into stuff that's not as big of not as speculative. And it's pretty clear that Bitcoin is the least speculative in this whole conversation. It's the only one to perpetually go into price discovery every cycle, like in a very predictable fashion. I also believe XRP is part of that conversation. And then everything connected to XRP, I think, is more speculative. So if you want XLM or HBAR or whatever, just realize that they're probably not going to hold up as much on corrections, but they definitely have more room for upside opportunity on pumps. The same thing with the meme coins. A lot of meme coins can make more than Doge, but they will correct a lot more than Doge too. Doge will be more stable cycle to cycle, in my opinion. Of course, that will change over time, but just sharing why this is not the stuff that you want to be putting in more than 5% of your portfolio. So that's the big takeaway when we look at a chart like this. This is venture capital. And again, if you were positioned positively, 3% of your portfolio before leading into this, that was a great move. You made about 3,000, 4,000%. That's typical in an alt season. Okay. So is something like this around the corner? Likely, but timing it's going to be very difficult. And sitting through this perpetual sell-off won't feel good unless you have a very negligible position in this. So hope that was educational for some of you. Now we're looking at SUI, which I know a lot of influencers got really excited about this cycle. But we have something very clear here, which kind of matches what I was saying about Ondo, which is the move up to the 1618. And this is, again, why I was cautious with this particular project. Another thing is we had this major parallel channel that the second we started breaking down from, we didn't have a kickback. So it's just been perpetually worse. And now the full correction is somewhere around 70%, which isn't awful. Although I will say I like the fact that we're at the 702. And this is an ironclad support hold at the 702. So unlike the Ondo chart, this to me feels a little better, personally. Again, take that for what you will, but with such a limited chart history, to me, this still feels like a better play. And it could be coming back up to get rejected again at this $5 territory. I'm not sold on the idea that it's going to go all the way up to the $10 range, personally. And if it were to, we're talking only 600%. So this again is going to be like in the event that XRP has a move up to like $8 or over $10. That's where you'll see SUI make the same move, and it'll be very, very euphoric. Like we're talking peak euphoria vibes if that were to occur. So right now, this to me has already had 1 dramatic correction, 2 dramatic correction, 3 dramatic corrections, and 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 70% or more corrections. This to me is not a stable feeling project, but the chart history is continuing to hold an uptrend. So when you see it backtest a critical level that was kind of a rejection point, and it's holding week by week by week, this can give you some confidence to start DCAing into position to get a little bit of exposure. But I would be, again, very cautious to make this my entire portfolio. And then again, one last thing to say is the main people talking about this and giving it a lot of hype are probably on the board of SUI. So just be careful that you're trusting that. All right. I'm not trying to create any drama or call out anyone, just being real with you. All right. So I'm going to wrap this one up here. This was an epic red pill packed to the gills. So much that we went over today. A little bit of volatility here in Vitho, another one that's back at lows matching December timeframe of 2022. Very fascinating. This December seasonality that we've covered today. Hope it shines a light on some of the things that maybe you're not really hearing too much about here in crypto land. And otherwise, I will be catching you all very soon. Just one final reminder, we have this holiday sale happening for you guys, specifically here in our mastermind community with this private link that'll be in the description below. Make sure to check that out. Package deals up to 35% off. Biggest discount of the year, covering everything from investing to decoding to health and wellness, mindset coaching, all of that. So I appreciate and I'm grateful for all of your continued support. I'm wishing you all an amazing rest of your week in the Matrix. Much love.